So these are 5 of the most important concepts that you need to master to build wealth. These 5 rules allow me to escape the rat race at the age of 35 and are getting me really close to hitting that millionaire status in the next couple of years. But the interesting thing is that I hadn't even heard about these concepts before turning 28. This just goes to show you how powerful and life-changing they can be. The first one is avoid lifestyle inflation. Now, I don't know if you know this, but around 70% of millennials today live paycheck to paycheck, and a whopping 40% of Americans with an income greater than 100K also live paycheck to paycheck. This is mostly due to what's called lifestyle inflation, which is often one of the most difficult to avoid obstacles when it comes to becoming wealthy. Most of us spend a huge part of our days working really hard, and by the time our paycheck finally arrives, we feel that it is time to reward ourselves. And so we go ahead and spend it almost immediately. When we get a bonus or a raise, we go ahead and do the same. So for most of us, the more money we have coming in, the more money we spend. Now, this is a major problem that unfortunately most people ignore, because spending all of your money month after month means that you're not saving or investing any of it. Instead, as you earn more money, you should try really hard to maintain your frugal lifestyle or even double down on it. In my case, the moment I started to make some money, and I mean like real money, I suddenly got a much more clear sense of what that money could really do for me if I invested it instead of spending it right away. And even though it is tempting to reward yourself for working so hard for so long, you should instead consider that the reward is that you get to have your money work for you and not the other way around. A great way to think about this would be the following. If you want to buy a new car, think about how much money you need invested so that the interest on that investment pays for the car. This is why instead of spending your money in an increasingly costly lifestyle, you should invest it to be able to afford an exponentially wealthier life in the future. Let me give you a mind-bending example. A $12 Starbucks coffee now invested at a 10% APR is $32 in 10 years. This means that to buy this $12 cup of coffee today, you're essentially borrowing 20 bucks from your future self. Now, it might not seem like a lot at first glance, but when compounding yearly, you could almost triple your money in a decade. A $60,000 Ford F-150 today is costing you a Porsche GT3 in 10 years. Have you ever thought about that? Every unnecessary, useless purchase you make today is costing you a ton of comfort in the future. Thinking about this makes me realize that I can postpone that impulsive purchase in favor of a much more desirable purchase in the future. What you need to do is maximize your income and reduce your expenses as much as possible, and then invest the difference immediately to put that money to work and grow over time instead of having it lose purchasing power to inflation. Now, you don't need to save to invest. You can, for example, invest in dividend stocks or shares of index funds as soon as you cash in your paycheck. Avoiding lifestyle inflation is the first step in securing a chance to achieve financial independence in the near future. The next one is learn the difference between an asset and a liability. Now, this is a fundamental difference that was put in the spotlight by Robert Kiyosaki back in 1997. An asset is a thing that makes you money. You spend money to buy it or make it, but then it continues to make you even more money. So dividend-paying stocks, rental properties, intellectual property that pays you royalties, and so much more would be examples of assets according to this definition. A liability, on the other hand, is something that takes money out of your pocket. It costs you money to buy or create, and then it continues to take money from you for as long as you hold on to it. An example of this would be your car, the house you live in, and other goods that require maintenance or that you have to pay taxes on but don't generate any money. Now, a car can definitely be an asset if you buy it for the purpose of renting it out and getting an income from it. But here, I would like to introduce a second definition that I find extremely valuable as well, and that is the difference between appreciating assets and depreciating assets. So within the asset category, that is the things that make you money, there are certain things that are simply better than others. To put it simply, an appreciating asset would be a rental property. So for example, a piece of real estate, whether it be a house, land, or a commercial building, will not only generate cash flow for you, but it would also be worth more as the years go by. So you'll get rental income from it and also capital gains. So to give you a quick example, say I buy a house for $200,000 and that house generates $200 in cash flow every month after taxes and expenses. Now, say I hold on to that house for 10 years and now the same property is worth $250,000. Okay, so I made $50,000 in capital gains from my asset appreciating in value, but I also made $24,000 in rental income that I can now use as a down payment to purchase another $200,000 house. Instead, if I use the same money to buy a fleet of cars that I can rent out, I mean, yeah, those cars would definitely make me some money, but at the end of the 10 years, the cars will be worth close to nothing. So all I will have left left is the rental income but no capital gains whatsoever because my assets depreciated in value over the years. Now, liabilities on the other hand would be things like clothes, electronics, your house or car, and any other thing that you need, of course, but doesn't make you any money. Now, you need a house to live in and a car to drive to work, but what you should take from this whole point is that considering that certain things make you money and others don't, and both cost money to buy, you should always try to spend your money acquiring as many assets as possible while keeping your liabilities as limited as possible. Understanding the difference between these two is crucial if you want to build wealth over the years. Next is differentiating good debt from bad debt. Now, there is definitely bad debt, but there is also good debt. And if you're anything like me, you were probably raised to believe that debt can only be bad. And it is usually the financially uneducated, like I was, who believe this. Let me explain why. Bad debt is high interest debt that doesn't make you money. In other words, is debt that costs you money. Good debt, on the other hand, is low interest debt that generates cash flow for you. In other words, good debt makes you money. Now, the first time I ever heard this concept, I was confused. How could debt possibly make you money? Well, that is very easy actually. Debt can make you money when you use it to purchase cash flow generating assets like real estate, tools, rental vehicles, land, just to name a few. We just went over what assets are, so how can you use debt to acquire them? So the way it works is you borrow money not to spend it, but to purchase something that will make you more money than your debt monthly payments plus the interest. For example, say I borrow $100,000 at a 5% APR. So if I use the money to purchase, let's say $100,000 worth of clothes or food or even worse, a car, then every month I'll have to work to come up with the monthly payments on that debt plus the interest. So essentially that debt got me a bunch of stuff, but it's now costing me a bunch of money. More money than I borrowed, by the way. This is bad debt. So how can I make this same debt a good one? Well, say instead of buying clothes or a car, I do something different. And similar to the example we saw before, I buy rental property instead. Say a house that I can rent out for a bit more than my debt monthly payments. So the rental income on the property is not only paying the debt, but also the interest on the debt. And it is also generating me a little bit of cash flow every month without me having to do any work. So that debt is making me money. And after a few years, the property will be paid off by the tenant and I will have made a bunch of money in rental income. And the best part is that I will now own the property that will most definitely be worth far more than the $100K I originally paid for it. So you see, I borrowed money to make money. Number 4 is get into a scalable business instead of a 9-to-5 job. Now, the reality is that a 9-to-5 has little potential to make you wealthy, and this is because you're essentially trading your time for money. And even if you have a high salary, the amount of money you can make is partially determined by the hours you work. And with only 24 hours in a day, there is a very real cap on how much you can make from working a regular job. So here's the truth, you will have to start a business if you truly want to make it big. And it doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar corporation or a software development company. It could be something as simple as a window cleaning business or a car detailing business. It doesn't really matter what business you're in. What matters, and here's the key, is that it has to be a scalable business. Now, for example, I decided to take a break from architecture and start a business when I realized that the architecture business model was not easily scalable. This is because if you work alone, there is a really hard cap on how much work you can take. Developing a project usually takes your full attention and time. Architects tend to work an insane amount of hours a day as it is, including weekends and holidays, so it is also really hard in your personal life. And what that means is that realistically, you can only do 1 or 2 projects at a time. There's not much you can do to grow unless you delegate and start spending tons of money in salaries and other expenses. And that pretty much takes away the profitability of scaling. So you need to make sure that you're participating in an easily scalable business that doesn't have a cap on how much you can grow it on your own. And it could be anything, you just need to make sure there's demand for it and that you can manage that demand on your own for as long as you can to keep your margins high and your expenses low. Great examples of this would be building an audience online. You can do a lot before you scale and hire other people to help you with production. Affiliate marketing, drop shipping, print on demand, and e-commerce in general are great examples of easily scalable businesses that require very little investment up front and have very low costs associated to them. Just find your business, find your niche, start maybe as a side hustle, experiment, and then grow it as much as you can on your own. And finally, make sure to diversify your investments. To put it simply, diversification is not necessarily about making more money, but rather protecting the money you already got. And you do this by spreading your investments across multiple assets or multiple asset classes. Now, what do I mean by this? Let's say you invest all of your money in the stock market and you spend it all buying Coca-Cola stock. In this scenario, the fate of your entire investment portfolio would be tied to the performance of Coca-Cola. Now, the upside is that if Coca-Cola does much better than every other stock, you you essentially beat the market and make a nice profit. However, if the opposite happens, then you could lose a lot of money or maybe even all of it if the company goes under. So you're essentially taking a huge risk by investing it all in a single company. So what most smart investors do is they diversify their investments and spread their wealth across multiple stocks. This is essentially a way to manage risk. If I own stock in 10 companies and one of them goes down, I can still rely on the other 9 to make me money or hold the value of my investment. Or if I own real estate and stocks and the stock market is not doing so well, I can rely on my real estate portfolio to continue to make me money. This is the reason why things like index funds exist. They allow people to invest in multiple stocks at once instead of a single company. In the case of real estate, we have REITs, real estate investment trusts, which are associations that invest in income-producing real estate and are traded like a stock. Here's the hard truth that for some reason a lot of people don't like to talk openly about. Diversification, or rather the lack of it, is one of those taboo topics in the sense that, yeah, it is wise to diversify your portfolio of investments and spread your risk, as we just saw. But there is a caveat. By doing so, you also risk losing opportunities to grow your wealth exponentially faster. Let me give you an example. If you invested in a broad market index fund like an S&P 500 ETF 10 years ago, you would have made a 270% return on your investment, which is not bad at all. $10,000 invested 10 years ago would be worth $37,000 today. Now, if instead you would have bought only Tesla stock also 10 years ago for $2.50 per share, you would have made an insane 10,000% return on your investment. The price currently sits at around $250 per share, which means that a $10,000 investment would now be worth a whopping $1 million. So, while diversifying your risk by investing in index funds could be low risk, you also miss on the potential much higher returns that you could have had if you invested in individual growth stocks that massively outperform any index fund. A lot of investors with high risk tolerance actually make their wealth by investing in individual stocks or specific businesses that do have a high risk of failing, but the higher the risk, the higher the rewards tend to be. Even Warren Buffett acknowledges that it is usually a few highly profitable investment decisions that make all the difference in a portfolio. In one of his annual letters to shareholders, he wrote, "In 58 years of Berkshire management, most of my capital allocation decisions have been no better than so-so. Our satisfactory results have been the product of about a dozen truly good decisions. That would be about one every 5 years." So anyone, for example, that chose to invest in crypto 10 years ago took a huge risk, but we can now see that that risk paid off massively. So if you already got to a place where you feel you've accumulated enough capital and you wish to preserve it, then diversification is the way to go. Instead, if you want to grow your wealth, then higher risk investments tend to provide the highest returns. Now, in reality, it is extremely hard to predict which investments or stocks will outperform the broader market. So you see, diversification as a strategy to grow and preserve your wealth is never really gonna be wrong. It is really up to you which path you want to follow depending on your tolerance to risk, your ambition, and how meticulous you are when researching your investments. So anyway, these are the 5 key concepts that I believe you should master if you want to make it big. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.